ate a steak before I came to work.
Oh, well, then stop bitching to me about food then. You were bitching about food.
Not at all, actually. I don't remember.
I don't need food. I'm perfectly content being fat just the level I am.
All right, good luck.
Okay.
We are good.
With it being, hello? With it being 6:33. Hello, welcome everyone. With it being 6:33, I would like to call this meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, I would like to request a moment of silence in memory of Paul Just, an educator at Francis Howell North High School, who we recently lost. Thank you. I'd like to turn this meeting over to Ms. Jennifer Joles for our special recognitions.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. Tonight we are recognizing an amazing group of individuals who work in large part behind the scenes to keep our school facilities safe and clean. I'd like to invite Director of Facilities and Operations John Klein to the podium to tell you a bit more about our custodial staff. Mr. Klein?
Good evening, Board. I am both honored and humbled to stand before you tonight for our very first recognition of our custodial group at Francis Howell School District. We all know that the COVID-19 pandemic created many challenges with a lot of ups, downs, rights, lefts, twists, and turns. I'm here tonight not to dwell on the challenges, but to highlight and share with you the work of our custodians during the 2020-21 school year to help keep us all safe. A lot was done by all members of the Facilities and Operations Department, but due to the shift work of our custodians, most are not seen or heard because of their work takes place in the shadows. Our custodial teams had probably one of the toughest jobs next to our instructors during the previous school year. They had to adapt their traditional cleaning regimens to make sure our buildings were disinfected each day and night. The guidance around cleaning procedures changed frequently as we learned more about the virus, but that did not stop our custodial crews from their task of keeping students safe. The custodial department manager, Dennis Nasifovic, worked out many agreements with building leaders on things that we would reduce to allow for more time to be spent on disinfecting all hard surfaces. The leaders of the various teams who are here with me tonight, along with their manager, Dennis, and their foreman, Admir, would not settle for second best, even with the pressure behind them around disinfecting surfaces to help keep people safe. Their passion and love for FHSD students and staff is strong in these leaders. They were determined to make their building shine no matter what. They came up with clever ideas like putting social distance signs in the floor and then waxing over it to keep them visible throughout the year. They came up with other ideas of providing spray bottles and paper towels to our teachers and staff so that they could also help keep their rooms and their spaces safe during the COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, when they learned of a COVID positive case that was identified in an office or a classroom, they spent extra time deep cleaning each room when they were aware of such. The manager even found an effective way to take hand sanitizer that would be compliant with the transportation regulations and would help kill the COVID-19 on contact for our buses. The custodial team also furthered with the transportation department on demonstrating more effective ways to sanitize the buses and how to properly use the chemicals to not harm the buses, students, or staff. In all aspects of their work, they exemplified true partnership at its best. Even with all this extra cleaning, they found ways to still tackle the tasks that we had agreed to put on the back burner because they would not let down on their pride for their buildings. It is because of their efforts and many others that I feel our exposure numbers were low and we did not have to close a single facility after reopening for the school year. While it's not possible to have all of our custodians here tonight, we do have each of their team leaders here. I am proud to present each of them to you tonight and shed a light on the shadows that work behind the scenes each day and night to keep our schools safe, clean, presentable to our community, students, and staff. Leads, as I call your name, please come forward and be recognized to receive your certificate of appreciation. Elvis Atmahamek from Francis Howell Middle. Carlos Allen from Warren Elementary. Michael Benskin. Corrine Capuano from the admin building. Ken Eddy from Independence. Jordan Fruit from Harvest Ridge. Bill Hebold was an acting lead who stepped in while our lead was out on medical leave, and he's from Francis Howell Central. This next one is Michelle Henderson from Hollenbeck. She's also our FHSD rep and helps keep the voice of our custodians at the forefront. Becky Holtkamp from Francis Howell North. Jacob Lacrone from Henderson Elementary. James Lamar from Sager. For those of you who don't know, James is actually retired from 2 different organizations, but he refuses to give up working. That's how dedicated he is. Debbie Mitchell, our lead at Francis Howell Central. Admira Muhik, our foreman. Rob Rutowski from Daniel Boone Elementary. Frankie Salou from, Frankie from, oh geez, Frankie, I forgot. Becky David.
Remember that, man? Thank you.
Becky David obviously is closed because we're doing some work there. So Frankie's been all over the district. He was currently at Central, so that's why I got a little confused there. Diana Tankersley from Francis Howell High. Richard Vigil from Fairmount. Julia Werner from Early Childhood Central. Sean Whitworth from Bryan Middle. Steve Coleman, who is our acting lead at Central Elementary. All right, and then just a couple that aren't here this evening. Dylan Crowley from Early Childhood Hackman. Irhad Sirik, who's here at Westwood. Mary Beth Lacrone from EC Meadows. And Misty Williams from Barnwell Middle. One more round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're moving on to our patron comments. Before we get started, I would like to ask that we all model the behaviors we expect of our children. That means listening to others' viewpoints, even when you don't agree, and refraining from snickering, eye-rolling, and other signs of disrespect when others are speaking. We don't have to agree with one another, but we do need to demonstrate civility and respect. Let's set a good example for our children. During patron comments, patrons are invited to address the Board of Education. When I call your name, please come to the podium so everyone can hear. The board is interested in the public's concerns and opinions. We do not respond to comments or questions during the meeting. Questions and concerns will be addressed by Dr. Hoven and other appropriate staff members at a later date. Please remember that comments will be limited to 3 minutes each. Per board protocol, comments about personnel matters and remarks about or directed at individual employees or students are not allowed. First up, we have Melanie Rankin. Sorry.
Thank you, Board. My name is Melanie Rankin. I graduated from Francis Howell High School in 1992. My husband graduated from Francis Howell North in 1990, and we have a son, Charlie, who will graduate from Francis Howell Central in 2027. We're here tonight to talk about our kids' education. We elected you, board members, to ensure that our children and all of the children in our district receive the best education possible. An education that will prepare them for life after high school, whether that be college, a trade, a professional career, or homemaking. We are trusting you to prepare them to be educated adults. To that end, I want to share some of my experiences. When I attended graduate school in North Carolina, it was the first time I had lived more than a couple of hours from my hometown. I went to UNC assuming that everyone had the same beliefs I did. The death penalty was necessary and justified, homosexuality was a sin, and every person, no matter what the color of their skin was, had the same opportunities as anyone else in this country. I was shocked to find out that so many people didn't share my views. But what shocked me more was that they debated me using facts, not emotion. And the embarrassing thing is, I had no answer to their factual arguments because I had never been taught the things they were talking about. I had never been taught about Japanese internment camps, Jim Crow laws, or the atrocities that happened during the Civil Rights era, other than that M.L. King was a black leader who was assassinated. In fact, in a year of English literature, a year of American literature, I never read a single book authored by a black person. I had graduated at the top of my high school class, magna cum laude from the University of Missouri, and I had already started a successful career, and I was humiliated by how much I didn't know. Fast forward a few years to law school, where I found myself attacking the constitutionality of affirmative action, only to be embarrassed again by what I didn't know and what I had never learned. I had never been taught how government condoned redlining kept black families from being able to buy homes in good school districts, or how the GI Bill provided so much more opportunity for white veterans than black veterans because banks, schools, and neighborhood associations were still allowed to refuse loans, admission, and homes to black people. When an African-American colleague told me how much she dreaded her kids' genealogy projects, I didn't understand because I had never learned that African-Americans' ancestors were forced to leave their identities behind when they were kidnapped and sent to our country to be slaves. So there was no way for her or her children to trace their complete ancestry. Again, embarrassed that I didn't know this simple fact. There's a fallacy that higher education is part of a liberal conspiracy, but I learned the hard, humbling, and humiliating way that it's simply education, learning facts, learning history, that causes people to change their viewpoints. By depriving our kids of facts, of a complete education, we are doing them no favors. We are raising them to be ignorant and to live with their heads in the sand. Is that what we want to be known for?
Thank you. Your time is up.
Next up, we have Ken Gontars.
Thank you. Last month, I mentioned a study produced by UMSL and WashU titled Racial Literacy in a Second Grade Classroom. Critical Race Theory, Whiteness Studies. In that study, there was a bibliography of over 110 papers, studies, and books which detailed and defined critical race theory. All the big names on the subject were cited: Delgado, Stefanik, Crenshaw. In every one of those 110 references, the same goals, the same objectives, the same content, the same verbiage, the same wording are found in the two courses being proposed at Francis Howell. For all intents and purposes, the course content for Francis Howell is critical race theory. Before this evening's meeting, I sent each of you a link to a video. It's the September 25th, 2020 Zoom curriculum kickoff meeting where Dr. LeGarrette King leads a meeting with 5 Francis Howell school teachers. They are reviewing and preparing the course content and introduction. Dr. King and all 5 teachers speak of the furor and pushback they anticipate from parents. Teacher 3 speaks of the challenges of being in a highly conservative county and of being in the middle of Trump country, clearly highlighting his political bias. Teacher 5 opines the difficulty of teaching the subject of white privilege. He says he'll direct students to acknowledge it, to look for it in systems, to counteract it. He'll hold people's hands to bring it forward, and how some students feel shame of being white. This is promoting an agenda. Dr. King asked, do we have to use that particular verbiage referring to white privilege? Use whatever verbiage to get the concepts across, he proclaims. That's what we're going to do. The key is administrative support. Teacher 3 says that she's been teaching white privilege for 10 years. She states how kids go home, tell their parents what's being taught, and how parents get upset when they're told that change needs to be done. She identifies herself as the anti-U.S. history teacher at times. More bias. Is this the attitude, the bias, the sentiment we expect from our teachers? The less than forthrightness in dealing with parents? Of the wordsmithing of what is really being taught in order to avoid controversy? Can the trust, truthfulness, and unbiased instruction of our teachers be counted on? Stop pitting black people against white people, Democrats against Republicans. Adopt curriculums, unite. Adopt curriculums that unite and do not divide. Do you know how many black people are against CRT? Type black against CRT in a YouTube search bar. A growing number of St. Charles residents are calling upon this school board to rescind its support for the 2 proposed courses. At a minimum, put a moratorium on approving these 2 courses.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Your time is up, sir. Next up, we have Harry Harris. Can you please let our speaker through? Thank you.
For the last few months, I've heard a number of non-black folks come up and talk about this subject to you all, so I really felt strongly that I come and speak with you tonight. 1 year ago, the district committed to ensuring that diversity, equity, and inclusion are integrated into the culture, curriculum, and policies of our district. That's what the Black History and Literature courses are here to do. The heart of these courses is all about inquiry and learning. I can't explain enough how important it is that our students learn our history. They can learn about the destruction of Black Wall Street, the rise of Madam C.J. Walker, the theft from Henrietta Lacks, the creation of Poor Oak College, or who Sally Hemings was. Now, you may not know about everything I just spoke on, and that's exactly why our kids need this option. We live in a world of multiple ethnicities, and our students are entering into a continually evolving job market of global citizens, and it's imperative that they learn about other people's cultures and their history. Now, we have some in our community stoked by media and politicians, some who are here tonight. I've seen Bobby O. I see you. Who are using coded languages and dog whistles while creating and handing out manipulative flyers that we've all seen to lie and try and create dissension and hate amongst our community for their own personal gain. They've created this omnipresent boogeyman and screamed that racial theories are being used to indoctrinate and make kids feel bad about themselves. I'm going to say this one more time for the people in the back or those who are hard of hearing, it's not happening. And no matter how many times they try to say it or manipulate the facts, it doesn't make it true. You are entitled to your opinions about our country's history, but not the facts. Facts matter. History is difficult and at times dark and depressing. And frankly, if you don't have feelings about it, you're not studying it correctly. So I'm telling you, don't be manipulated in trying to start a culture war in our district. Listen to me. We are not Rockwood. We can and will be better than that. And those of us who care are not going to let a circus like that start up here. What we are going to do is keep fighting for our seat at the table and making sure all of our children are getting the well-rounded education that they deserve. Believe it. For our board, a year ago, you took the right first steps. I strongly urge you to continue this progress and approve these courses and allow our teachers to do their jobs. Thank you.
No. Next up, we have Camille Johnson. Next up, we have Camille Johnson.
Hello, everybody. My name is Camelia Johnson, and I am a teacher in the Francis Howell School District. My children have and currently do attend school in the district. I come to you as a mother, a teacher, and a resident of Francis Howell. This is my 23rd year of teaching. I have always taught equity and diversity in my classroom. Why? Because it's important that all kids are heard and seen. I'm excited that the Francis Howell School District is going to consider taking actions to have courses that represent the history and the literature of those that are not the majority. What saddens me is that this is so bothersome and fearful for so many. I try my hardest to see both sides of every coin, but what I can't for the life of me understand is why people cling to verbiage. Right now, the hot topic words are critical race theory, and they're so frightening for so many. Does anyone stop to ask themselves why? Can we get past the verbiage and have real conversations? Is it that the minority is going to take over society, erase our history, and make our children think that they're bad because they're white? It seems ridiculous. It seems ridiculous to even utter those words. But that and others are the points that the opposition are trying to make here. As a teacher, the answer is a resounding no. That's not what teachers are trying to do. I do not know a teacher in this district that has any intentions other than loving and teaching our collective children. I am proud as a nation that we allow public forums like this to ensure that all voices are heard and discussed for the betterment of all. That is not easy work. These courses are elective, so if anyone has a problem, just opt out. There's not a logical explanation for this argument other than fear and misunderstanding of the subject matter. We all need to look at the actual content before we consider this information hurtful to anyone. The truth is that America's story is a large novel with many chapters. In the past, the chapters have been written from the ruling majority's perspective. As teachers in an elementary school, we teach kids how to read from different perspectives in our reading units of study. So why is it a fight when we want to do that when it pertains to teaching them history? Shouldn't we practice what we teach our kids to do? Shouldn't we not just preach it? There's enough room in this American novel for new chapters, ones that represent all viewpoints and experiences. Isn't that what we pride ourselves on in America, being this great melting pot? So does that only apply in verbiage and not in action? Because that's what this is about.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Next up, we have Gordon Midgley.
Testing. Can you hear me? I'll have to lean forward, I think. God bless the people of Cuba standing up for freedom against tyranny this week. It was inspiring. I firmly believe that black Americans, by and large, are patriots who love America and oppose Marxism and communism. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you to each of you for the many good things that you do. I spoke to several teachers before this, and they're just great people. As a patron and a taxpayer, I insist that our schools not be used to promote leftist, neo-Marxist, racially divisive indoctrination. We need to nip this in the bud. I'm here tonight to rise in opposition to the proposed BH and BL curriculum as designed. It is laced with the tenets and language of critical race theory and other leftist indoctrination. I've seen it, and many others in the district have seen it. It's unacceptable. I strongly urge that the curriculum for these two courses be disapproved and sent back to be significantly redeveloped. We can teach American history, and black history is American history, without approaching it in an activist way from a leftist, Marxist indoctrination narrative. Leftist indoctrination in our schools is not acceptable to the Francis Howell community. How did this CRT sneak into the proposed curriculum? Who did it? I can tell you who did it. Whether they know it or not at the time, the Board of Education itself is responsible for this. The board passed a resolution on discrimination in August of 2020 and allowed the specific language of cultural Marxist, racially divisive CRT to creep into that resolution. The resolution has not aged well. We've seen that activist educators in the district on more than one occasion have used the language of the resolution as justification for including CRT-related concepts into the teaching material and curriculum. So, board members, now you know, it was you. You broke this, you need to fix it. It can be fixed by replacing the resolution with new language that opposes racial division and discrimination, that is unifying and healing, and that promotes racial harmony, equality, and goodwill. Each member of the board has been given a copy of the proposed replacement for that resolution. I respectfully, strongly urge the board to adopt this new and improved resolution at the earliest opportunity. We want American equal opportunity, not communist equity of outcomes. We want racial harmony and goodwill, not a cynical anti-racism that boils down to Marxist, oppressor, oppressed, fixed classes based on skin color. We want the principles of Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, not anti-American Marxist activism masquerading as civil rights. We want unity as we all pledge allegiance to the flag and support and defend the Constitution and our individual unalienable rights.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Next up, we have Ellie Lichty.
Hello, my name's Ellie Lichty. I'm a senior at FHN, and I wanted to begin by asking the board to approve the Black History and Literature courses, as these are an amazing opportunity to broaden students' learning experience. I understand there's protests against these courses, which is the reason for being here today. I thought I would start off by sharing an experience I had a little over a week ago. I was visiting DC, and one of the things my family planned to do was to visit Thomas Jefferson's home, better known as Monticello. The home was beautiful, and the tour guides did an amazing job at teaching visitors about Jefferson's life, which one part they made sure to properly educate the public about was the fact that Jefferson owned slaves. I understand that for some people this came as no surprise, but I was not one of those people. I was overwhelmed, I was frustrated, mainly at the fact that I was never taught this. One thing I came to ask myself over and over was, why could I tell people that Jefferson loved to read, that he was inspired by philosophers such as John Locke and Rousseau, or that he spoke 6 different languages, but I could not tell them that he owned slaves? Why was I being taught every breath of Jefferson's life except for this one aspect? Beginning the conversation that major white historical figures owned slaves is only the first step. The next step is to acknowledge black historical figures as more than slaves. It is important to recognize people such as Maya Angelou, a poet and activist who was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom and received more than 50 honorary degrees. Or Katherine Johnson, a math prodigy who graduated high school at 14 and helped to lead black women to work in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The list goes on. But the point is, these courses open students' education to new heights. I cannot stress this point enough, but if you don't want to participate in these courses, you're not obligated to take them. But please, do not rip away another student's opportunity to learn.
Can you please respect our speaker? Thank you.
Author Ta-Nehisi Coates stated, "To acknowledge these horrors means turning away from the brightly rendered version of your country as it has always declared itself to be, and turning towards something murkier and unknown. It is still too difficult for most Americans to do this, but that is your work. It must be, if only to preserve the sanctity of your mind. It is not without difficulty, but the work must start here in our community." Thank you.
Next up, we have Carly Gordon.
My name is Carly Gordon. I'm a student at Francis Howell North, and this is my second time speaking at a board meeting. When approached to speak at this board meeting, I was shown a photo of a flyer handed out by community members. This flyer read, "Say no to critical race theory," and listed some of the problems with CRT, such as the teachings of riots, privilege, and intersectionality. I've listened to these types of things happening in other states through podcasts and the news, but it was jarring to see it within our community. So let's dive a little deeper into it. The introduction and eventual perpetuation of misinformation. It doesn't start here in our homes or even in our community. Rather, it starts on a production set in DC or a blog post online. If you generate enough coverage or enough clicks, suddenly you can convince the masses of anything. Enough buzz has been created around critical race theory, it doesn't even matter what it stands for anymore. And this is how that flyer reached our community, through someone regurgitating nonsense they saw on a TV. The opposition pushed critical race theory as a boogeyman, a creature underneath our beds, lurking in our schools. However, our ignorance is the real monster in the situation, not critical race theory. As a group, we have decided to not consume consciously or investigate independently. We pick fights over concepts we don't understand just because someone told us to. We mindlessly criticize an academic movement looking to understand race and the law. Many of the points listed in this flyer have nothing to do with anything at hand, the new classes or critical race theory. Never mind that the new classes, Black history and Black literature, are not teaching critical race theory. These actions are a real threat to academic and societal discourse. If we dismiss these new courses simply because we are triggered by certain phrases, we are doing a real disservice to those who don't have a voice in this matter. Conflict lies in the bigotry behind our ignorance. Can we not comprehend that learning the history of riots does not negatively impact any part of our education? How is learning about climate truly a bad thing or relevant at all to critical race theory? Our devotion to the maintenance of societal norms has robbed us our ability of our collective empathy. I am appalled at this behavior. Our new classes aren't the problem. It's the lack of understanding hiding in our community and some of the people here tonight. Thank you.
Next up, we have Kim Bolden-Jones.
Hello, I'm Kim Bolden-Jones, and I've been in the Francis Howell School District for the last 25 years. And I will say that overall, I am proud of this community and how they educated my children. But right now, I am sad. I am sad because you are seeing the way our community is divided over two elective courses. Two elective courses. The one thing we should all agree on is that we love our children. We want the best for our children. We want our kids to be prepared for their world ahead. And the world is changing. And we have to change. And we have to look at what's best for our children. Is it best for our children to have an education that is not complete? Is it best for our children to not be able to understand some of the rights that we've done in this country and some of the wrongs we've done in this country? It's right for us to make sure our kids have a well-rounded education. And for us to sit here and argue over two elective courses about African American history and African American literature is beyond sad to me. I feel like, as a community, we have so many more things that we should worry about. Why can't we fill these rooms when we talk about child poverty and all the things that go along with children that are under-resourced? We fill a room today with people arguing over two elective courses. And I don't care whether you think it's critical race theory or not. The point is that they haven't even called the first roll, and we're already fighting about it. They haven't even gotten off the ground yet. So why can't we wait? Why are we here? All right, so you don't want to wait. Well, the thing is that there is nothing wrong with having elective courses about both sides of the story. There is nothing wrong with our children being able to understand what we are and who we are. And that's every kid, not just African American kids, but that is our whole community. I want to say quickly, the board committed to this work, and I hope they stand behind all of us and continue this work, because this is important. Our kids need to go into the future and make sure that they have all the tools they need to succeed. And that doesn't mean living in an isolated society where they don't see any other point of views. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Ava Rose Mussey.
Hi, my name is Ava Mouze, and I'm 9 years old, and I feel like I should talk about how I feel. I feel as if I were useless and a piece of trash and get judged by our skin color. Whites and blacks should be treated equally. For example, my mom always gets a dirty, awful look like she's going to steal something in the store. And I try to figure out every day why all of us just can't agree and get along. It's so sad that I can't learn about my culture in the school. The only thing I learn in school is white. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's disrespectful to me how I don't know anything about my own culture. But the one thing I know is that if no one else teaches me about my culture, my one and only teacher, will teach me happily about everything I should know. Thank you for listening and have a great day.
Next up, we have Nikendra Musi. Nope. Here she comes.
Hi, my name is Nikendra. My question is, why is having a course for all students that include history of Black Americans such a major issue? Is it because of deeply rooted evil that parents don't want their children to learn about? The gory details of how Blacks were treated and the certain race of people that treated them that way? Are the questions too hard to answer for the white counterparts, children to understand? I have to explain to my Black child every day her Black history, and she doesn't know why she doesn't learn about that at school. Taking these classes away will be taking a piece of history all kids should learn about. Learning should never be one-sided. All the pieces to the puzzle of history from all races should be learned. It's pivotal to the character of a child living in a diverse society. Just a little tidbit of information I'm pretty sure a lot of kids don't know about. Sally Hemings, Thomas Jefferson's slave and mistress, bore him 6 children, for sure maybe 8 kids. Jefferson freed Sally's children, but not her. Her daughter had to free herself after Jefferson died. History of Blacks that's not taught. A strong lineage to white Americans. I'm here today to voice my concern as a parent and to tell the board to be fair to the Black students, to be fair to all students for that matter, that attends these schools. Let the Black kids and their parents know that they are a big part of history that is important to learn about. Thank you.
Thank you. That is our time for patron comments. Next up, we have FHEA comments.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Keller. As a member of the FHEA Exec Board, I am here tonight to address the Board of Education on behalf of FHEA. Since the June board meeting, many things have happened. 1, a town hall meeting was held, which was invitation only, unless, of course, you were invited by a board member who did not organize the meeting. 2, FHEA filed a grievance for not being notified for the 3rd time about a board meeting, as indicated in 4835 CR number 1. We are pleased to say that the district admitted their negligence and have now put a system in place of notifying FHEA and giving us all materials per board policy. 3, FHEA received an email from Policy Committee with more policies being brought to you tonight for their first and second readings and approval, thus not allowing any patron comment on them. Once again, this is just pushing through policy changes to fit your needs. 4, the FHEA president received a text from a board member on June 18th questioning what was said to FHEA members after the June board meeting. The text was interpreted as a bullying tactic. When shared with the officers of FHEA, President Keener was advised not to respond because what was said in the text was disingenuous and did not warrant a response. This is how FHEA works. It is not a single person's decision on how to respond to any topic. But when that board member did not get a response, he texted the second vice president, stating that he sent the FHEA president a text, but she did not respond. So, Mr. Board Member, let me answer your questions. The things that you, your fellow board members, and the administration have done to the teachers over the past 4 months, all of the gaslighting, this is what has caused the divide. The mob-style tactics, as you called it, are things that membership decides to do or not to do, not the president or officers, the membership. Your words, leaders negotiate, adjust accordingly, and build bridges. You using these words in your text to the FHEA president is hypocritical because A, you did this to your teachers in negotiations. B, you would make no adjustments. And C, you have not attempted to build bridges. In fact, you blew up a bridge. Your decisions have disrupted your teachers' lives and work. It will no doubt affect classrooms and students as well. Our working conditions are our students' learning conditions. We do want things to get back to the way they were, but you, all of you, have decided to form a human wall, keeping teachers and the community out of decision making. You've drawn a line in the sand, and we are willing to cross it. When you are ready to talk openly and honestly, we will be there to listen and respond. That is, if we still have time, with being limited to 3 minutes, and with all the additional responsibilities that many of us will be gaining to make this year work without
you.
the
Your
full-time
time is up.
release of the president.
Peace bump. Peace bump. All right, board, I would like a motion to approve the agenda for July 15th, 2021 as presented. So moved. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the June 17th, 2021 minutes as presented. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the June 17th, 2021 board retreat minutes as presented. Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I'd like a motion to appoint Jane Hepler as Secretary to the Board of Education, who shall enter upon her respective duties the 15th day of July 2021. So moved. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I'd like a motion to appoint Jane Hepler as Custodian of Records for the Francis Howell School District. In order to facilitate public access to district public records, the Board of Education will appoint a Custodian of Records. Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We will now have our MSBA Board reports.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's Board Report for the month of July. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the federal funding available to Missouri school districts designed to address the impact of COVID-19. Missouri is set to receive nearly $2 billion under the American Rescue Plan's Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, sometimes called ESSER 3. 90% of that money will be distributed to local education agencies, mostly local school districts. Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, Dr. Carrie Monzes, told school board members attending the recent MSBA Igniting Great Ideas Summit, school districts can use the money to address a number of key issues related to COVID-19, including the need for additional instructional time for students.
Anything you can do to enhance your learning opportunities outside of the traditional school year, whether that's summer school or some type of intensive tutoring, after-school programming. I don't know that communities automatically think that has to be sustainable moving forward. We've had more and less summer school over the years, so here's an area where you can make a short-term investment. Hopefully it's sustainable, but even if it's not, every minute you get with a student that you don't have now is important. So to the extent you can advance those programs in your district, I think it's going to have a huge return for you and your students.
Monzi says school districts must submit a multi-year plan for using their allocation of ESSER III money to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education by August 23rd. However, he says those plans may be adjusted in the future. He urges school boards and administrators to be transparent and engage stakeholders on the use of the federal money. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has submitted a plan to the U.S. Department of Education for the use of its share of the ESSER III funding. DESE's priorities for the funding include investing in the educator workforce, resources for learning acceleration, and addressing the digital divide. Speaking of the digital divide, a new poll released by the National School Boards Action Center shows 2/3 of voters nationally say lack of adequate broadband and internet access outside of school buildings is an important issue to address. The poll reveals voters' attitudes about their children's educational experiences during the pandemic and also conveys the challenges and opportunities voters see facing our public schools. Past MSBA President Rhonda Gilstrap of the Blue Springs School District is one of 7 members of the National School Boards Action Center Board of Directors, and she reported on the poll results at the MSBA Delegate Assembly meeting in Springfield on June 18th.
Voters are significantly more likely to have a positive view of public education when they think of schools locally as opposed to nationally. Learning loss among students is a huge issue for voters as we continue to grapple with COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, voters say the top challenge their local public schools have faced during the pandemic is students having quality broadband and internet access at home to attend school online. Support for increased funding for public education is strong. Voters are opposed to taking away taxpayer dollars from public education to go toward private school vouchers, and there is broad overall support for personalized learning and increasing access to internet and broadband.
The bipartisan poll was conducted in April and reached 1,000 likely 2022 voters nationwide. The National School Boards Action Center provides national grassroots advocacy on issues important to school board members and public education. Nancy Masterson, a school board member from the Camdenton R3 School District, is the new president of the Missouri School Boards Association. Masterson became MSBA president at the conclusion of the 2021 MSBA Igniting Great Ideas Summit held in Springfield June 18th and 19th. She has served as president-elect of MSBA for the past year. She spoke to those attending the second general session of the Igniting Great Ideas Summit.
This year, as in years past, we will need to light the tinder of your enthusiasm to press forward when needed to do what is best for all children. The year ahead looks challenging. We must be persistent, well-informed, yet professional, kind, and unshakable when addressing the needs of our students with legislators and the press.
Ray Murphy of the Richards R5 School District was elected president-elect by the MSBA Delegate Assembly. Ruth Johnson of the Raymore Peculiar School District was elected vice president of MSBA. Linda Doherty of the Nixa Public Schools will serve as immediate past president for the coming year. Registration is now open for the 2021 MSBA Annual Conference in cooperation with the Missouri Association of School Administrators, to be held November 5th through 7th in Kansas City. The event will once again feature numerous breakout sessions and workshops, many presented by school leaders from districts throughout the state, along with a great lineup of general session speakers, all in the new location at the Kansas City Convention Center. And don't forget the 2021 Safe Schools and Colleges Forum, sponsored by MSBA Center for Education Safety, will be held this year on November 4th in conjunction with the annual conference in Kansas City. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Thank you. Now Mr. Klein will give us an update on our status of Prop S projects. Mr. Klein?
All right, good evening. So I'm going to highlight some of our larger projects, but I will tell you that this summer has been extremely busy with lots of projects happening, not just with Prop S, but with general work across the district. So starting off with our security vestibules, you will see here, this is the initial parts of the work that's happening. The best way to kind of describe the work that's happening here is it starts off pretty slow, but it's going to start picking up. A lot of it had to do with some tearing out of the existing doors, using, cutting in some holes in the walls for the transaction windows that are going. So you can kind of see over on the left there is Warren Elementary, kind of showing you where their transaction window will be. It'll have an extended window so you can see the visitor coming up. And then on the right there is Barnwell Middle School, and they have already gone ahead and put in the bulkhead for the second set of doors, so they've moved those doors back, and then the vestibule will go between the front doors and that new set of doors that'll lead into the office. Becky David, lots happening in Becky David. As I mentioned earlier during the custodial presentation, that building has been closed for this summer because we are doing some major renovations in that building. We've replaced all the heat pumps. We've updated a lot of the electrical. There's a lot of flooring work that's been happening, painting's going on. If you drive by on the front, you'll be able to see the new vacation station entrance dock that was torn down and re-poured. And then the work has already begun on that boiler loop. And if you remember from earlier stories on Prop S, the boiler loop was one of the things that was kind of causing it to condensate in the hallways. That has all been replaced. New boilers are installed. And in fact, actually our new HVAC towers have been installed as of last week, and we are looking forward to being able to fire those up, both boilers and the new rooftop units, hopefully by the end of next week, and get that building back up and functional. A lot of lighting work has continued. As you remember, during spring break, we did some work in some of the common areas, or in all the classrooms, but this summer we've been doing all the work in the common areas. So the cafeteria had some lighting updates. The hallways all got lighting updates, and then did some additional fireproofing when we had taken down the ceiling tile to bring the building up to code. And here are just a few pictures of that. The new gym lighting going in, it's got half the lights it used to have before, and it's twice as bright. We've got new LED fixtures in there. The ceiling tile has all been removed in pretty much the entire building now. And has been put back up. So this is an earlier photo from a couple weeks ago here at the cafeteria. And then you can see the painting is all happening simultaneously as we are continuing to work through the building. So it's been a team effort, and I just want to thank the Becky David staff again for their flexibility. They're currently working out of Barnwell this summer while we are doing the work there in their school. With Mother Nature kind of delaying things and us having a shortened time, we had to really get in there. So literally the day school ended, we began work in there, and we have not stopped since. The facilities team has been overseeing this. It's been one of our projects through our Omnia partnership, which has helped us get things at a much reduced cost and being able to make sure that we maximize those dollars towards Becky David, and that's been led by Dan Allison, Mike Dieters, and Lance Broughton. So good work on that. And then moving forward, showing you also some of the new lighting that I was talking about on the left there. That's all gone in the hallways there. You can see the new piping being cut for the boiler loop, and that's being put in as we speak. And then that is the footprint of what is the dock in the front of Becky David. If you remember, or if you've seen it before, it was very deteriorated and falling apart, and so this gives it a fresh look on the front of the school. Paving. We had some massive paving going on this summer with Francis Howell Central, Sager, that big parking lot, and Bryan. They were identified through Weiss Design Group as some of our worst parking lots in the area. And so we started with those first. We integrated that new technology of using glass pave and glass grid, which gives the asphalt that's being overlaid much more strength. And so we use the existing asphalt as the base. They did some patchwork there. They did a very skim coat over the patchwork, and then they laid this fabric, and it was kind of a cool thing to see with the little tractor that kind of wheeled it out. But they are moving pretty fast on that. We've had a few weather delays, but we are still on track to complete that before the end of the month here. And you can see also that they repaired a lot of the curbing, and the thing that we're doing too is also testing our compaction of the asphalt, and that's what the gentleman is doing in the far picture on the right there, is testing the compaction strength of the asphalt to make sure that it meets the criteria that we set, because we're looking forward to extending that life of our pavement and making it a much smoother ride for our parents and guests to the building, as well as our buses. Over at Sager and Francis Howell Central, there was a lot of pooling every time it rained in the parking lot, which also caused some of the damage of our previous paving, and so we added some new drainage to the parking lot to kind of help keep the moisture out of the parking lot and put it out into the drains that it's meant to go. Same thing happened at Bryan, but here you'll see the picture of the drainage trenches being cut. You also see what we call the leveling course, and basically that's to even out the pavement before they use that glass grid and that glass pave technology that we're adding to it. So that would go down first just to kind of even out the surface, and then it's laid down, and then pavement comes back over it. Francis Howell North, that project has been moving quite fast, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here. We have weekly construction meetings now started on site at the trailer with Atlas Building Group and myself. We meet with SM Wilson, who is our builder. We're reviewing kind of the progress that's happening there. The grading work has begun. If you remember, there used to be a field and a stadium there. That quickly came down as soon as school ended, and moving of the dirt has begun to build the new high school. It's a little crazy right now going into the Henderson and Francis Howell North campus there, just because we have started to expand the roadway, because we're making a special lane just for construction traffic to go in and out, not to interfere with our busing and our parents and our students and teachers getting to the campus. So that has been widened, and it's been moving ever since. We are going to have some jersey barriers up to separate those spaces, and some new striping, and as well as using SM Wilson to help us create a drone video of how the new look will be coming into campus, that we can send out to families and students and staff so that they're aware of how it will look when they come and know which way to go, as well as some additional signage. We also have been doing some site utilities work and rerouting old and starting to dig for the new, and that is in process. And then just to kind of give you a glimpse of where we are and how fast this has been moving. So we talked about doing the CMAR, or the construction management at risk process, which is what we're using. But if we had used the traditional design, bid, build, which means we would do the designs, we would have them 100% complete, and then we'd go out to bid, and then we would then start to build. If we had started using that process, we actually wouldn't have started our groundbreaking, which we had back in May there. We would not have started that until November, just because it would have taken us that long from the time that the bond was passed in June. We would have awarded a contract in October, and then started our groundbreaking in November, and then looking at moving into the building in October of 23. And then in 24, obviously demoing the old building, and then full site completion in March of 26. Using our CMAR process, we move a lot faster. And so back in June, we elected to go down the path of CMAR. We were able to have our groundbreaking in May. We have been doing bidding out of the construction packages, large construction packages, as we've been moving along in the process. And part of that has also been helpful because we also engaged the builder for the Francis Howell North project early on. And so we've had the builder helping us with the design, but also having the builder as part of the process has helped us identify the best times in the market to try and go out for materials and for some of that larger work that needs to be done. We are still kind of monitoring the different inflationary rates, and as well as the delays in raw materials. but we are moving forward in a much faster process. And so with that, we would be able to look at, as we continue down, as long as things move on track like we are anticipating that they are at this point, we are looking at an estimated move-in of May of 23. So if you remember in the previous slide, we were talking about October of 23, with a full site completion looking in September of 25. And this next slide here actually puts all of it together. Where you can see all of the differences between. So the shadowed out ones is the outline of the design bid build process, and then the CMAR time comparison here, you'll see there's about almost a year's worth of savings in the construction process, which means we get our students into a more suitable environment before. Here is just some images of the actual site, the site grading. So what you're looking at, that used to be our athletic fields. Actually, the first one there at the site grading, that is actually at the stadium level. That's where the stadium actually was. And then you'll see that the old sanitary pipe has been removed as they're rerouting that. You'll see some of the new greener PVC piping in the back there. That's where they're starting to route some of the new. And I am very excited. We are going to show you our first glimpse tonight inside the new Francis Howell North. I will let you know that not all of the colors have been selected, but this will give you a good idea of what this school is going to look like. So it starts off with the front of our building, and I'll let the video play. So this is walking in the front doors. It's going to take you past the administrative offices, counseling suite, into the cafeteria. And we've talked about this, and you're about to see it here in just a second, but we've talked about the Google staircase, or that collaborative learning space. And so this image here will kind of put that into perspective so you kind of understand how it can be a collaborative space. Those wider steps on the right-hand side are big enough for people to sit and kind of talk. Looking into our cafeteria here. Our auditorium is coming up here on the right. And then that entrance there would be where our buses would unload and load. You see those Google staircases there. You can see how they're wide. We've got a couple people sitting on them. And then coming up, we are about to enter the athletics area. Coming through, there'll be a concession stand area to your left, some storage space to your right, and then entering into the main gym here. The main gym will actually overlook the new football stadium. And that's our new gym, and you can see the football stadium in the distance there out the windows. Still of our cafeteria again. Back out into the gym lobby. And then looking down the main staircase from the center of the building, the Google staircase and the main staircase into the cafeteria. And that's a quick glimpse of inside the new Francis Howell North. So at this time, I'll entertain any questions the board might have about any of the projects that I've talked about tonight or Francis Howell North.
That's awesome. Any questions, board? Mr. Lane?
I think the question on most of the parents' minds, will school be delayed in any of our buildings, such as Howell and Beck and Barnwell and Becky David, that have all the renovations up front, or school for every building will start on time?
No, we're at this point, we're anticipating every school will start on time. I know it kind of looks a little slow with what's been happening, but the best way to describe it is we've also had to have some inspections along the way, and so it looks like work may not be happening, but the crews have been allocated to other schools. Our three largest projects obviously are going to be Hollenbeck, Central Elementary, and Barnwell, just because they've had the most expansive work and some scope creep on there. But all of them are slated right now to be finished before school starts for the fall.
Anything else, board? Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we will do an update on COVID-19. Dr. Hoven.
Thank you. Now that we've reached the midway point of our summer and gearing ahead in just a few weeks to be back to school, we thought it'd be a good time to give an update on COVID, where we stand now, what's going on with the CDC, our local health department, all of that. So what I'm going to go through tonight, I'm going to start with updates to our CDC guidance. So we know that from the new guidance, fully vaccinated individuals no longer need to quarantine. So we know for a while this spring, even with a vaccine, individuals were still required to quarantine if they became in close contact with a positive case. That is no longer the guidance of the CDC. So that's a significant change in the CDC guidance. Next, they have said still maintain at least 3 feet of distancing when possible. So they really are saying 3 feet now when possible rather than 6 feet. Also, they did say distancing should not be a barrier to reopening schools. And it is important to remember as we look at CDC guidance, many schools around the country still never did start this last school year, and so they're really looking ahead to getting all schools back in across the country for next year. And so they did make that point. We don't want distancing to be something that keeps schools from starting. They have also said that masks are generally not required outdoors. They do still require masks on buses even if vaccinated, and that is a CDC order. That's not listed as a recommendation. So we do still need to be aware that buses will require masks at this point. They did say as well, when removing any given mitigation measure, just to please remove one at a time so you can then monitor the impact of what you removed. So this past year we had tons and tons of things we were doing around COVID, not to just drop everything at once, but drop things one at a time when possible so that you can monitor the impact of those changes that you make. Moving from the CDC to our county health, we know that as of tonight, we are still required to contact trace when positive cases arise. And I say we are required to contact trace. The county, we work in partnership with the county on that. So there is still a requirement of contact tracing around positive cases. There is still a requirement to quarantine when close contacts are identified unless both parties are masked. We also know that, going back to that CDC guidance, if you are fully vaccinated, close contacts do not need to quarantine. We know that if both parties are masked, and by both parties we mean both the positive case and a close contact, a modified quarantine can be used. So this is the guidance really from our health department that we adopted back around Thanksgiving. So still contact tracing, still doing standard quarantines unless both have masks on, in which case you can do modified. What I've put at the bottom there is it is important to understand that as we're hearing schools around the region talking about being mask optional, as of right now, that would mean anyone identified as a close contact would have to have a full standard quarantine. So unless they're fully vaccinated. But a non-vaccinated individual would have to go home for a quarantine. We would not be able to have the option of a modified unless both parties were masked. We wanted to talk a little bit about the trends in our COVID-19 data, and there's a few different things we're going to look at here. This first one talks about our student cases across the district, and really without even seeing the specific numbers, you can see that this graph runs from January through June, and you can just see the incredibly great decrease we've seen in positive cases. Obviously, once you get into June, you're talking about summer school. It's not near the population of students in our buildings, but you can even see how much lower May is than January. So the blue line is all combined. The other lines are broken out by level, but the same trend you see in all levels is just a great decrease in the number of positive cases we've seen. Next thing is to just talk about what has happened in summer. Throughout the summer school programs, throughout this month, throughout June, we've had no early childhood, no elementary, and no middle school positive cases. So we have had masks on all of our students, but at those levels, masks or no masks, we didn't have any cases and therefore no quarantine standard or modified. And remember too, going back, when we talk about positive cases, all school year long, the absolute vast majority of our cases did not originate in school. They came from home, they came from the community, you know, exposure to family, exposure to friends. So to have no cases in our early childhood, elementary, or middle school also means that includes no one came to school having gotten COVID from someone at home or anything else either. We did have 3 high school cases during our summer school programming, 2 students and 1 staff. Those 3 cases collectively were a total of 5 quarantines, 3 modified and 2 standard. So for example, if masks had not been required over summer school, we would not have had any positives or quarantines at early childhood, elementary, or middle school. We would have had 5 standard quarantines at the high school if masks weren't on. As it stood, we did still have 2 standard quarantines, but 3 were able to stay at school. Just to talk a little bit about both regional and statewide things that we are seeing. Fully vaccinated individuals, our county right now ranks 3rd in the state as far as highest vaccination rates in the county. Not to mislead, we are still under 50%. 43.6% have been completely vaccinated. St. Louis County is 2nd county in the state in terms of percentage. So around the state, they're not high numbers, but we are you know, in the top 3 in the state in terms of our county having been fully vaccinated. I'm going to show you a series of graphs. I understand from the audience it's a little bit hard to see, so I'll talk about what you see here. This is the 7-day average new case rate, and these graphs, now that we've been at this for a long time, run from January of 2020 until now. So this is about a year and a half worth of data. You can see at the very beginning, COVID had yet to reach our area. Through the spring and early summer, numbers were pretty low, and obviously in the middle, right there around November into December, it got really, really high. But then we saw a really steep decline after that. As we moved into January and February, things fell off really, really low. So the lines on here, the red and orange and yellow lines, many places use those as kind of indicators of what level of sort of alarm you should have around your number of cases. We could choose our own there, but just the idea here is you can see how much lower we are at this point than we were definitely in November and December, but even how much lower we are than early last school year. However, before we go off of this chart, I do want to draw your attention to the very end of that graph. We are currently seeing a slight uptick. It's nowhere near as high as we got last year. It's definitely nothing I would describe as high overall. But in my role, I consider that something we need to be keeping an eye on. When we start to see an uptick, we want to watch. You know, obviously we hope that's not a trend that continues to go higher, but it is something we will watch. This graph talks about the positivity rate in St. Charles County. So the purple line is the state of Missouri, so that's the higher line at the end of the graph. The black line is our county. Again, you saw a nice decrease in the positivity rate over the course, and this graph just runs from February until now of this year. So you see it was really a nice decrease all the way up until really the end of May, pretty flat through June. But just like that other graph, here at the very end, we're starting to see an uptick in that. So again, something I consider we need to keep an eye on and make sure, is that a temporary uptick or is that something we need to be more worried about as we continue to watch that? The next graph, this is the 7-day average new cases by age. And so only the first 3 bars on this graph are school age individuals. So once you get to that the first 4, run us up through high school age. That first tall bar that goes above the orange line, that's the 20 to 24 age group. So anything there or to the right would not be school age individuals. But those first 4 are all in a really good place. Early childhood, 0 to 4 years old, is that first bar. It's really, really low. So everything on this page is really positive information for us about how low the new case numbers are for school age individuals in our county. This graph's a little bit confusing, but I'll talk through it. Now that we have been working through COVID for over a year, this actually gives us an ability to compare where are we this year compared to the same point in time last year. So purple is this year, green would have been 2020. So you can see as we entered the year in January, last year in green, there was no COVID. It hadn't reached our region yet. This year, obviously in January, we were still dealing with new cases. We were on our way down, and you can see eventually we got down to a much lower spot. The important thing I think to look at here is at this moment, we are almost identical to where we were last year at this time regarding new cases. So we didn't know as much about it last year. We were still learning. We were gearing up to try to get back to school in the first place. But just to point out, our current little uptick is right in line with where we were last year. Now, unfortunately, last year that uptick went up quite a bit more, flattened out for a while, but then went up a lot. Obviously, that is what we are not anticipating this year and what we do not hope to see, but just pointing out where we are compared to last year. This, again, it's going to be hard to see from your seats, but this is current new case rates, average daily cases in the past week across the country. You can see the hot spots, and right in the middle of the country, that's southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, is definitely a hot spot in our country. And from everything we're hearing, that is mostly due to the Delta variant that has found its way into those regions. So this is a stark reminder to us that COVID is still real. It is still out there. And across the country, you can see that most of the country is not dealing with the hot spots such as the southern part of our state is. Moving into a little closer look at our state, we can still see here that we're still okay. Our numbers are still in a really good place. All of the other slides we showed you would say that the St. Charles County region, the Francis Howell School District region, is still in a really good place. Springfield and that area down to the southwest can't say the same right now. So I consider that, again, it's not here at this moment. It's not something that we're at the moment concerned is rising in that way, but it is something we'd want to watch. I think it's also important to understand not just our region, but watching how that, if it does expand out of that southwest region, being able to understand how it's working its way. If it does start to spread across the state, we would ideally be able to watch that coming and understand the potential impacts on us. And this is a snapshot of Greene County, which is where Springfield, Missouri is, just to show you how far out of the norm that is as compared to the state. So on this particular graph, the black line is the state of Missouri. The purple line is St. Louis County. I don't have this graph for St. Charles County, but we're actually a little bit lower than St. Louis County. So you can see that what Springfield is experiencing in the Springfield region is quite a bit more significant than anything we're seeing. And so I don't put this up here as a cause for alarm. I just put it up here as it's still real, and in regions where they're being impacted by this, it is still real. Springfield, about a month ago, was talking about being mask optional and very optimistic about where they were headed. As of this moment, they've got a different reality, and we've seen that over the entire year and a half we've been working through this. That's the nature of COVID. Whatever we think is great right now, and really actually very well is great right now, might be a different story in 2 weeks, in 4 weeks. And what we've seen over the course of the year and a half is that could go either direction. As soon as you're getting more comfortable with something, it could get worse. And as soon as you're worried about it getting worse, you see that things level off and get better. So, I think it's going to be a while before we are out of this concern of having to just watch and be ready to react to changes in the situation. So what's next for us? We will continue to communicate regularly with our health department. Our next scheduled meeting is next week with them. We will continue to meet, understand their guidance as it compares to what the CDC has recommended and what that means for our region. We will also continue to monitor the spread of COVID-19 in our region and state, including the Delta variant. So, as I said, right now, it's not an immediate concern for us, but it is out there. It is something for us to be watching and keeping an eye on. I do want to point out, regardless of any decisions that we make between now and the start of school, things may change, and they may still change again before the start of school. They may change after we start school. So we will make our best plans, but we have to continue to be ready to change if needed. And the last part is we will strive to make decisions at the narrowest possible level. And what I mean by that is we were absolutely fortunate last year in not having to close buildings. And as we started to learn throughout the pandemic, early on, entire districts closed. You started seeing instead a building close or a classroom close, things like that. You know, if you talk about masks, you can talk about the situation impacting a single building or a single classroom, things like that as well. So we don't want to overreact and make, overreact to a single incident arising and impact the whole district when it might just be a single building or classroom that is at stake. So we will continue to try to make the good, logical decisions in the narrowest way we can. So that is my update on our current reality and the guidance that we have in front of us. Any questions I can speak to?
Board, questions, comments? You want to start the discussion?
I'll get it started. I guess we're near 30 days out from the start of school, and I know we received comments from a number of parents on both sides of the issue. Some want us to continue masking, some want us not. So I think at some point in time, and probably sooner rather than later, we need to make a decision as to what our plans are for the start of the year, as opposed, so that the people that want to make a change in their child's enrollment, whether they wish to go virtual or whether they wish to come back to school, will have time to make those changes. How much time do we need to make those changes if people want to?
We're in a different situation than last year, and I'll ask Dr. Buckman to weigh in if I say something that she disagrees with. But this year, we're going to end up using vendors for a lot of our virtual students. So someone moving to virtual is an easier impact. Moving from virtual to into our schools is much harder. Our staffing is set for the students we expect to see in person. And so that's, we've communicated with families being able to just switch. We've asked them if they have any concerns at all to list themselves as virtual so that we don't put them in a position where they're asked to make last-second decisions. Did you want to add to that, Dr. Buckman?
I would just add that we did the first round of survey and said if you feel like masking isn't going to change your decision and you're ready to lock in to either virtual or in person, go ahead and lock in. And if you're not sure yet, then we'll check back in with you. And so we have, gosh, off the top of my head, I want to say around 300 families that have asked us to check back in with them. And so those are the families that I think are waiting on the masks decision to decide what they want. And so once we make the decision, we'll be able to check back in with those families. And then if they want to make that adjustment, we can do that.
And I will add one other detail to it too, is in order to be fully vaccinated, you do need to get the 2 shots and then have 2 weeks after that second shot. So if we're talking about students who, if we weren't in a mask required situation, the surefire way to avoid getting quarantined is to be fully vaccinated. I understand that's only going to be true for our students who are 12 and up, but that's another issue if you want to have time. If you have not yet opted to get your child vaccinated, giving enough time to get both shots and have the 2-week window is the only way to ensure that if we didn't have masks on everybody, your child would not have to go home in a quarantine. And that takes time. To get both shots and that 2-week, you do need, about how much time we have left.
So my question is, if we decide that we want to go mask optional, I just want to make sure we would allow any family in our district that was uncomfortable with that to make a decision to go virtual, no matter what they had chosen earlier.
And based on what Dr. Buckman just said, we've tried to be really clear on that. If you believe your decision will be based on masks either direction, please continue to list yourself as virtual and we'll check back in with you. We're a school district. We do everything we can to work with our families and put them in the best possible situation. But we do find ourselves as a district trying to make staffing plans and staff our buildings as well. But we're always ready to do what we can for any individual given family, especially in times of hardship. But we do anticipate that our families really have looked at our communication and understand that if they're going to potentially change their minds, that they're in that list of students that Dr. Buckman mentioned.
Dr. Howell, can we possibly get this presentation loaded into board docs?
Yes.
For anyone?
This is actually populated with information that I just received late yesterday,
Yes.
so we weren't able to get it posted publicly ahead of time, but we'll get it posted after the meeting for anyone to be able to go back and review.
with the information we have available and in order to have some uniformity within the county, I'd like to move that we go mask optional for the start of the school year.
So are you making a motion? So the motion is,
To be mask optional at the start of the school year, which would put us in line with the rest of the districts on this side of the river as well as most on the other side of the river.
and who did I hear second?
I'll second it.
So we have a second?
Second. I will second.
Got it. Got you, Doug.
Got you, Doug.
Okay, so now let's have discussion around that.
Before we get into any more discussion, I'd like to add a couple of details to that. Currently, the bus masking is a CDC order, not a recommendation. So unless we get changed guidance between now and the start of school, we are required to have masks on buses regardless of what we do otherwise. I also think it's important for us to talk about, and looking at our data, only 12 years old and up, as well as our adults, can be fully vaccinated. And so, again, we do have really low numbers. Early childhood is very, very low and has been for quite some time. Elementary numbers are also very low. But we do understand those children don't have the ability to be vaccinated. In all cases, unless someone is fully vaccinated, we know it's going to be a standard quarantine. So that is, but the numbers are really low at this point.
Sorry. So for discussion purposes, my only concern is that our community needs to be aware that should the numbers change, should the Delta variant arrive in force in St. Charles County, we will need to do everything we can to protect everybody. So regardless of what we decide here, our community needs to remain somewhat flexible, as this virus has proven to be somewhat flexible.
Yep. And so what I would say is, you've seen that the states around our region, it's literally an overnight decision at times to put masks back on students or adults, depending on the situation. So, you know, if this motion passes, I encourage everyone not to just go out and burn all of their masks just yet. We do still need them on buses, and there are situations that literally you could go home on a Thursday and be told, you know what, starting tomorrow in this building, we need to have masks on.
Are you comfortable the way the motion is worded, that we have masks optional in school? Do you think that's okay, the way the motion is worded, being that we are going to have to wear them on buses?
I think it accurately portrays, you know, there's so many nuances to all of this, after-school activities, all of those things as well. It might be more clear to say mask optional at all times except on buses, because we've dealt all year with, well, what about if you're at practice? What if you're at an after-school club? What if you're here in the evenings? What if you're at before and after, you know, what if you're at vacation station? All of those things create lots of questions. So it would probably be more clear if the intention is everywhere except on buses, that we word it that way.
I'd be fine with modifying my motion to exactly what
Masks
you said.
optional
Masks
at all
optional.
times except on school buses.
At all times except on buses. Doug, would you be willing to withdraw yours? And he said yes, so I'll remake that motion. Are you going to second it again? He seconds it again. I can turn him around so you can see him.
At least first semester, I would like to see some of the procedures remain in place, such as, parent volunteers, board members. We were also asked, parents, that we limit the amount of adults in the building. And I think it made a huge impact, that you requested that all of us, the board was part of that set, that we do not enter the buildings just to visit, that we keep as many people out of the buildings so that keep our children safe.
I will say that we are currently in the process of reviewing all of our mitigation procedures from last year.
Thank you.
You know, earlier in the presentation, we talked about how the recommendation isn't just to drop everything at once, but just to, you know, make changes so you can monitor. I won't promise that we will only change one thing, but we will be smart about that. I think the other thing that I actually thought you were about to say is that we continue to keep a close eye on the numbers. Dr. Rumpus has, when he came to us last year, I don't think he expected to be so deep into COVID data all year, but whatever numbers I need, I can ask him, and a few minutes later, he's got it at his fingertips. And so we'll continue to keep an eye on that. I think it's also important to let you know I am actively on calls with school districts, both in our region and around the state, where we understand, and in the education community we share. People talk about, here's what we're dealing with right now, here's what it looked like, here's when we noticed it coming. That will all help us learn too, so that we're not caught unaware if something should start to change for us. But I think not just positivity numbers. What we were so proud of last year was what we saw as an absolute almost non-existent amount of spread happening in schools by the data we could track. That is obviously something that if we didn't have masks on everybody, we would need to keep a very close eye on. Positive numbers is one thing, spread in our schools is related, but it's a different thing we need to keep our eye on.
And I just want to reiterate, Dr. Hoven mentioned this earlier, but with this decision, we do lose the option of modified quarantine. We shared throughout the spring, when we had a lot of cases, that thousands of students were able to remain in school receiving instruction on a daily basis. Based on the number of cases that we had in April, May, and as we've gone into summer school, that would have a minimal impact, but any increase in the number of cases, we do return to all students going home for a minimum of 7 days or 10 days in that quarantine. We did have successfully 1,500 elementary students attending summer school and camps this summer. We did not have a single case. I think we've had around 1,200 kids attending vacation station this summer. We did not have a case, but we know that that's always a possibility. So I just want to remind everyone that there is a trade-off here, that we give up that modified quarantine in making this decision.
That is only for unvaccinated students and staff,
That
though.
is correct. If you are fully vaccinated, you would be, and we get that proof from the state you are allowed to remain at school or teaching.
Thank you.
And I would just like to ask, if you start to see what you may think is a school spread, we need to make it very aware, the community very aware that masks could go on in, let's say, a classroom, if you think a classroom needs them, and this could happen overnight. It could happen in an hour or two, I wouldn't say an hour, but overnight, next week, whatever it may be. It can happen fast, and it's always going to be a reality. It could be classroom, it could be a building, and if you start to think it is school spread, then the option could be all elementary, all middle school. I mean, we will always be watching and tracking.
I think it even applies if our community numbers got to a concerning point where now it's not just a single building, but it's the whole district. But I do think, yes, we would be as narrow as possible in our reaction, but it is important for everyone to know that those could be very quick turnaround decisions. What we would want to see is if we had a number of cases that appeared to be connected pop up, we would want to quickly do what we could to keep that from growing bigger. Because as we've seen, it can grow really quickly if you're not ready to react. And I think too, the question was just raised again about if you're fully vaccinated. It's a good time to again reiterate, for those who are old enough to get it, that is the one surefire way to make sure you won't be impacted by a quarantine because of someone else being positive, is to be fully vaccinated. We had a lot of concerns last year, especially from parents, not just about missing education, but about missing after-school activities and sports. And again, the best way to ensure that is if you're eligible to be vaccinated.
I'd like to add one other thing to that, is the fact that you brought it forward that we will need to be responsive to changing circumstances. And I want to make it clear to everybody here, it's my intent that Dr. Hoven and administration have the ability to make those decisions on the fly as necessary to protect our district and our students. I don't believe that the board needs to come back and make any additional motions or any changes. I want to make that clear to everybody. I think we're all in agreement on that.
I appreciate that, and of course we would be in contact with you, and many of the decisions you're seeing around the area end up being temporary decisions to get past a spike or an increase. But if something more permanent were to have to happen, we would certainly, keep the board involved in that as well.
Any other questions, comments, board? Okay. All. No, he withdrew. Yeah, so we're good. All right. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Board, I would like a motion to approve the consent agenda for July 15th, 2021 as presented. So moved. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the purchases over $7,500 as presented. Any discussion, board? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I'd like a motion to approve the revisions to policy regulation 4320 GE as presented. Ms. Simpkins.
Thank you. Board, I just want to thank you for allowing us to present these policies to you as a first and second read tonight. I know this is a little bit outside of our normal practice. Our negotiations with our employee groups lasted a little bit longer, and these are changes to our policies that we spoke to with our employee groups and had come to tentative agreements on. All of the changes that are being presented to you tonight will benefit our employees. This particular policy around personal days will allow our employees to have the flexibility to use their personal time a little bit more freely. It removes the barriers of taking a personal time before or after a student break or a holiday, and really allows our buildings to monitor the number of absenteeism or absences that are being requested. So we believe that this will allow our employees to utilize their time better and take advantage of that time off to be with their family and engage in any work-life balance things that they need to do. So we are pleased to bring this to you now. As many of our employees are already working this summer and are asking for those personal days, we want to be sure that we're following the policy and giving them the opportunity to use those days.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, board? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I'd like a motion to approve the revisions to Regulation 4505 CR as presented. Ms. Simpkins.
All right, thanks. This is another policy that will benefit our employees. Again, something that we talked about with our employee group and are bringing forward tonight because we would like to utilize this policy with our new teacher hires, as well as be able to communicate to our employees that may not have been able to take advantage of this when they were hired. Our previous policy does not allow a previous master's degree to be awarded or applied to our teacher salary schedule before the teacher certification. And this policy will change that. So if a candidate comes to Francis Howell and has a master's degree in biology, then goes back to school and gets a master's degree in education and then becomes certified to teach, we'll be able to apply both master's degrees to our salary schedule. And that will allow us to be competitive in recruiting and retaining our teachers as we move forward. So again, it is a time-sensitive policy. That's why we're asking for your approval tonight, so that we can apply that to our new hires that are coming forward, as well as communicate that through our staff so that if that happens to apply to them, they'll be able to make those changes with us on the placement of the salary schedule.
Any discussion, board? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I'd like a motion to approve the revisions to Regulation 4511 GE as presented.
Mrs. Lang, I'll speak to this one. This regulation addresses our program for providing employees with an opportunity to do some substitute work and to earn credit toward the cost of their insurance. This item was discussed at length with our employee groups through the negotiations process. It was something that, as Mrs. Simpkins said, with the other things that had preceded tonight, we had come to consensus with our employee groups. And so we do want to be able to move this forward. It'll be a benefit. It's a streamlining of the process, make it easier for everyone to understand. There are also enhancements to the program. We're extending the time period that people qualify for the benefit, and we're lowering the entrance for people to qualify for the benefit. So it definitely several definite benefits to our employee groups. And again, discussed at length through a negotiations process with all of our employee groups who are impacted by this regulation. So we do want to move it forward so that people who are making decisions about what they'd like to do with this program can opt to participate based on these improved benefit package.
Any questions, discussion, Board? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We are now at superintendent comments. Dr. Hoven.
Yes, thank you. Tonight I want to publicly thank all of those involved with researching and creating these 2 new courses that were approved tonight. These courses are a great step toward creating better educational opportunities for our students. These courses have been needed and requested by our students for quite some time, and I am proud that we will finally be offering them. At the heart of everything we do is what is best for our students. We will always keep that at the forefront of our decisions. If anyone has not yet had a chance to do so, I encourage you to read the entire curriculum for each of these courses. I also encourage you to seek out and read the related books and other resources. After reviewing all of that, I have no doubt you will agree that these courses are an excellent addition to the Francis Howell School District.
Thank you, Dr. Hoven. Board, do we have any comments, requests?
Seems like I'm talking a lot tonight, but I just want to make this comment. As many of you know, there's a video circulating that currently has over 20,000 views. After viewing the video, I hope that the words and actions of a few academic committee personnel and committee members does not take away from the hard work of the committee who put together a Black History and Black Literature course. Dr. Hoven has assured us that CRT will not be part of our curriculum at Francis Howell. I will work to ensure our teachers will remain unbiased and will not integrate CRT into the course content as was alleged in the video. I will work hard with the board and administration to ensure that safeguards are put in place so we don't cross that line. Thank you.
Anything else, Board? Okay, Board, I'd like a motion to return back to closed session. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed?